even though you may get angry, and even though you may get sad, and even though you have this full wide breadth of emotion, still underneath there is this kind of gentle.
Hello and welcome to Finding Your Spark again. I am so glad you're here with us again. My guest today is Bob Martin. He's a Taoist, Buddhist, Christian, criminal trial lawyer. I mean, that is a mouthful. He's a meditation teacher, he's a social worker, and he's a happiness coach. He has 2 published books, and I cannot wait to talk to him today. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I feel so grateful to get to be here with you. Now, I had the benefit of reading some of your background, and I will say for our audience, Bob, sometimes we have some people on the podcast who kind of came out of the chute thinking, I'll be peaceful for this lifetime. And Bob has had a very, very wide range of experiences. So we're going to have a really interesting conversation today. Tell me a little bit about, because both books are really interesting and worth mentioning right up front. Tell me a little bit about your inspiration for the latest book and all of that.
Well, that's an easy question for me. The inspiration for the book. So I grew up with a pretty roundabout, roller coastery kind of spiritual path. My folks were Eastern European immigrants whose all their families wiped out either by the Bolsheviks or the Nazis. And they kind of came to the conclusion that there couldn't be a God. And so I was raised up without any kind of religious background at all, which of course led me to starting to wonder about how the universe was created and what that organizational force in the universe was. And that was, that was an interest of mine, I would say. So my life as a criminal trial lawyer, I started representing a lot of folks from the various different facets of the mob in Miami during the cocaine cowboy days, maybe doing a lot of stuff I shouldn't have been doing. Things were kind of falling apart. I mean, I was getting very wealthy, but I was going down some rabbit holes. And I was seeing a therapist, and I came to a real big crossroads in my life, and I asked him what I should do, and he picked up some coins and started throwing the coins, and I'm paying him $65 an hour, and he's throwing coins and figuring stuff out, and then shows me a book, and the title of the chapter that he opens to was Retreat. So I promptly cursed him out and left, and then realized that the advice was what I needed to do. And I was able to save my house, which, I was about to mortgage it and sell it. And I went back and I asked him, what that was. It turned out that it was the I Ching, and that he was the English language editor for a 72nd generation Taoist priest. 72nd generations handed down from father to son. And so I was interested in what he was telling me, and I took up with it. And so I wound up studying under Master Ni for 8 years. And that was my introduction to Taoism and virtue. Well, long story short, I had to leave Miami because my clients and I ran into some conflicts, and came up here to North Carolina, and eventually I got divorced and got remarried. So my second wife is a Bible literalist. She is a Southern Baptist Bible literalist, believes in the Bible absolutely, that it is inerrant and the like. But she is a bodhisattva. She's a saint. The Taoism and meditation transformed my life. It turned me from an arrogant son of a so-and-so into somebody who was happier and more gentle. And so we met on our values, but we couldn't really talk about our different belief systems because they were so far apart. I mean, Taoism is non-God driven, and Christianity is very God driven. So they're so far apart. But the teachings, there's not a hairbreadth of difference in the teachings. So I started taking the main book of Taoism, which is called the Tao Te Ching, and taking the little meditations and seeing, well, where in the Bible is this teaching reflected? And then I started transposing the language of the Tao Te Ching into Christian language, which she immediately got. And so it actually, the inspiration, to answer the question, the inspiration was, it was an act of love, and it was the creation of a Rosetta Stone so that we could talk about our beliefs and our dreams and our goals and what makes a person happy. And so it was a wonderful gift to our relationship. But then when other people started to hear the writings, word got to Kendall Hunt, and they sought me out and they asked if they could publish it. And so it has now been published by Kendall Hunt, and I'm real excited about that.
Yeah, it gets quite a good response, I see, from everybody, which is amazing. Um, Also, there are so many things I would like to talk about what you just said. But I'll just quickly mention that I love the feeling that you have given here about how we are all, although speaking it in different language, talking about the same thing. And that is really, really, really hard to do, and to be a translator, right? Of thought, one thought form to a slightly different thought form that is represented in these other words. And for me, that was a really pivotal part of how I began to understand things that are bigger than me. And I had a lot of resistance, against a lot of things. And this is the other thing that I love about this story that you just told, um, which is that sometimes people come into the world and they have very large resistance, right? They just have like, I am going to just go and do the opposite of what everybody says to do. And I feel like there was a lot of that in my youth. And so I do really relate, although thank goodness I was not involved with the mob. There was a lot of that in my youth that I can relate to. And I think we can all relate to, um, seeing the world in a way that is harder and more difficult and more realistic, that according to a lot of people, right? Um, then what we need to do when we decide that happiness, peace and happiness are part of the goal of living, and which is really different than winning, right? Doesn't mean you don't win, but it's a really different goal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so there was just so much in that, from resistance to oneness, right? To you tying together the parts of the world that are trying to express themselves, this unexpressible thing. It's unexpressible, right? So no wonder we all use different words. So I would love to zero in a little
Okay. But can
on,
I just add one little thing? I would
yeah.
take what you said one little step farther. I would say that happiness is the only goal in life. And of course, you have to stop and say, well, what do you mean by happiness? I mean, is it joy, or is it getting, debauched in one night or something like that? But if you ask me what happiness is, it's having purpose and meaning, living for something that's greater than yourself, and having a kind of internal joy that abides. And even though you may get angry, and even though you may get sad, and even though you have this full wide breadth of emotion, still underneath there is this kind of gentle swaying of joy, that just abides. And that's what I mean by happy. And that's universally everywhere you go in the world. If everybody, I want to be happy.
Yeah, that's right. That's
So go
right.
ahead, Bill.
And so I call that unconditional joy,
Yes, yes, yes.
right? It's part of something that is bigger than you, than your little life on this earth. And whether you think that you keep coming back on the earth, or you think like this is your one time through and then you go to another plane, or whatever the thought pattern is, it doesn't matter, because that thing is enduring. It's outside of time. And when you find it, when you can tune into it, it's in this life, I think it is miraculous, right? Not everybody gets that. And when you do, then everything can shift in your whole life. So I want to zero in on that one part, which is really that transition. So you kind of said it quickly and easily, like, oh yeah, so he threw the coins, and then my life was different, and then I decided to study. Let's talk about, how did you decide that this is for me to know more about? So I think that seed of curiosity is really important for growth.
For me, there is you might call it a true self, the real self, the true you, the internal wisdom. You could refer to it by, if in spiritual terms, we might say the soul. For me, it seems that it is a point of connection, that when you are in that, when you are speaking from your true self, when your soul is conscious, that there's a sense of connection that you have, and all of a sudden the ego kind of goes away. I think the ego is what causes most of our suffering and our nervousness and the like. What are they thinking of me, and am I doing it okay, and all of those things. But it's kind of like a beautiful brand new blackboard, and it's so pure and it's so black. It's like a big mystery that there's, you can almost sink into the depth of it. And then you write on it, and then you erase it, and then you write on it, then you erase it, then you write on it, erase it. Finally, it becomes a gray board, and you kind of forget the blackboard that's down there underneath it. And I think that when you go through the trials and tribulations and the crises in life, that you begin to want to find that blackboard again. And you're willing to maybe give up some of the conditioning and the stuff that's been imposed upon you. You begin to want to give up the you that the world has made, and then find the true you again. And when you get to that point where you kind of recognize that this isn't me, there's something inside me that's more than this, then you want to seek, you want to look, you want to find. And if serendipitously something comes along at that moment, and the desire is there and the preparation is there, and you've done a little work, and all of a sudden the opportunity presents itself, you just grab onto it, and you're willing to do whatever work is necessary in order to have it, not for your sake, but for the sake of the joy.
There is a saying, desperate as only the dying can be. And there's a little bit of that feeling of the precipice of desperation in almost every story I hear about. I was in one realm and I decided, this is not for me. I am more, and I'm going to go find more. And then there's this new thing. But there has to be a willingness to let go of everything that you know.
And there has to be an awareness of the possibility, an awareness of this soul, the awareness of this true self, that you sense that it exists. Because I think that so many people, you walk around down the street and you see people with grim faces just passing you on the street. hard lines on their face, and you could just get the sense that there's no choice in their life. They don't have a choice. This is who I am. This is how I think, and there's no alternative.
Yeah.
And if you're there and you don't know that there is an alternative, then you don't seek it. Somebody once said, there's the stuff that you know and that you know it. Like I know a little, I know there's law and I know that I know about law. Then there's the stuff that you know about, but you don't know anything about it, like rocket science. But then there's the stuff that you don't know, that you don't even know that you don't know. And sometimes you don't even know that there is another you that's possible in there. You don't even know. So there's these, you can't look for it. You can't figure out. And that's sad.
I think that's the piece that desperation helps with.
Yes, yes,
Right?
absolutely.
Is
Yes,
that,
ma'am.
there was a time in my 20s when my life was a disaster. It was just a disaster. And one thing was presented to me. If you go do this one thing, these people will help you, and you have to do everything they say. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. I am all that is, right? I am smart, and I am, I'm full of myself. I have been 10 foot tall and rocket bulletproof during the whole time. So when that moment goes where you go like, I don't, maybe I don't know that there's something more. Maybe I don't even, maybe I think this is all just crazy. But if it will get me out of this spot in a way that that I don't ever have to know about this place again, I don't ever have to go back to this place, then I'm willing to just believe whatever you people believe, or whatever that book believes, or right. And creating that kind of willingness is not as easy when you don't know that the jig is up, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No,
uh,
you're right. You're right.
I remember there was this moment. I had a friend who was helping me with this exact thing that we were talking about, and I took to the concept of faith or hope quite easily, right? And I thought, because I thought, well, that's all I got. That's it. I'm gonna just lean into that. I don't think any of this is true, but I'm willing to believe that it doesn't matter if I believe it, that I'm just gonna move toward it. And there was a day I woke up and I didn't have that faith. And I was like panicked. I was calling her out. I don't have it. And she said, "Well, do you think faith is when you feel good because you think it's going to work out? Faith is when we walk through darkness and we don't know. We don't know. We don't have that." And I love that sense of the unknown in that space that you're talking about, right? Because that's really what that was for me, is that feeling of complete unknown, possibility in every direction.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
now what? Now it's up to you what you
Mm-hmm.
choose.
Right, right.
Which is there's a sense of freedom in that, from that space of, this is the way life is, then I just have to live through it.
There's a phrase or a concept in meditation work called beginner's mind. And the it's always great to be an expert in something, but the problem with being an expert is, I already know how this is going to work out. I'll give you a little example. If I had a client come in my office and he said he's charged with this, which is a class H felony, and he has this background, he's got 2 priors and 2 misdemeanors and this, that, and the other thing. In my mind, as the expert, I already know what his sentence is going to be. He's looking at, probably 6 months and then probation or something like that. And if I know it, if I fall into that trap of having the expert's mind, that is what he's going to get, because I've already determined it, and I will work to it. Will That's what will happen. But if I can step back into beginner's mind and I say, well, I don't know what's going to happen in your case. I just don't know. We're going to do the best we can. We'll see, look for the best results. Sometimes there are miraculous results because you didn't know. and you had that beginner's mind, and you were open to the possibilities, like you were just talking about. Possibility is everywhere. So expert is good, but it's also good sometimes to be humble.
Yeah, and this idea. So, my language around these things is often just from my own mind because that's how I came to it originally. And so I always would call that collapsing the wave, right? Don't collapse the wave. And really, this brings us to a point in where I know you talk a little bit about science, and this is really where that comes from, right? Where we sort of go from being potential to being some version that we are experiencing that we call reality. And that sort of just don't say what it's going to be, right? Try to let go of what it's going to be. So powerful, so incredibly powerful to be willing to be content and in safety and in joy in that unknown. That's really powerful. So let's talk a little bit about why science. Why? So you bring all these different things together, which is amazing. But a lot of them are in that sort of spiritual realm, right? They're in the religious or spiritual realm. And then I read about you a little bit about how you bring in the science behind it. And let's talk a little bit about why is that important and why were you drawn to it?
Well, back as philosophers were beginning to pen or speak their thoughts, the East and the West, they developed very differently. There were the physicists who decided to study physical nature, the nature and physical existence, and there were the metaphysicists of the East who said, no, by looking inside of me, I can figure out how the universe works. And the interesting part about it is that what the metaphysicists opinioned about how the universe worked and what the physicists are finding about how the universe actually works are coming together. They are finding that the heart, for example, has a particular code and that it is readable by other folks, so that sense of intuition and the like, as is the atoms look like universes. There's kind of this micro macro uh, copying and the like. Um, so there's that, and so that attracted me to the brain science of it. There's a wonderful organization at Berkeley called the Greater Good Science Center. I'm sorry. And all of the people that deal in brain science and happiness, they all go through there. They all have teachings there and the like, and it's just a wonderful place. And they offer a course in the brain science of happiness, and it's just a wonderful thing. I think the important thing is this, though. You have a right side and a left side of your brain. We know that. And the very front of it is the prefrontal cortex. The right side of the prefrontal cortex has an energy quantity, and the left side has an energy quantity. The right side, if it is more energetic than the left side, you can predict almost with certainty that the person is going to be pessimistic, caustic, grumbly, will see the glass as half empty, cynical, suspicious, those kinds of qualities. If the left side of the brain is got higher energy levels, you can almost predict with certainty that the person's going to be optimistic, hopeful, faithful, see the glass as half full, and the like. So this is kind of interesting that science is mirroring what the ancient wizards knew, that I have to do something to increase the left side electrical field if I want to lead a balanced life, because the right side is about survival, and it's about fear, and it's about danger. And we get that stuff thrown at us all the time. And all of that stuff is creating more neural pathways and creating more electricity on this right on the right side. So if we don't take some practice, if we don't intentionally do something for the specific purpose of increasing the electrical activity of the left side of the brain, we will not be balanced and we'll go down the rabbit hole of pessimism. So some of those things are jogging. When people go out and they get that jogger's high, you're increasing your electrical activity here. Meditation is another thing. Being involved in charitable work. Here's a funny one: ballroom dancing.
I just started. I just started like a
Did
few
you
months
really?
ago. Yeah.
Ballroom dancing is known as one of the greatest left side enhancers ever.
You know what's funny about ballroom dancing? So when I
Uh-huh.
was young, I danced like by myself, right, as like a dancer, and uh, but I'm an adult, and I thought I gotta go somewhere and do something. I want to have some fun, right? So I went to this ballroom dancing uh, place and said I want to learn, and they said okay, no problem, and you show up. And the hardest thing, and I think this is so interesting in what you're saying, for me, was to allow someone else's energy field into my energy field. It's a two-person
It
activity,
is. It
right?
is.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there's
yeah,
connection. There's
yeah.
connection.
There's connection and there's trust. There has to be trust, even with people. Like there's a group class I go to sometimes, and I never saw the person before, and yet you have to instantly be willing to use all those extra sensory activities that you have, right, available to you, and to trust them, right? To know your intuition and to be able to trust what you know about the person that's right in front of you. I love that you're talking about that. I never thought that would come up. That's so great.
It's really true. And the science of it is that neurons that fire together wire together. So every time you have that sensation of trust, or every time both feet move in the same direction and you get a step and you're able to execute it with another person and you have that connection, there's a bunch of neurons in the left side of your brain that are firing together, and they start to form a pathway. And the more you do that, the thicker it gets. And the thicker it gets, the easier it is to have that thought. So if some people say things like, "Oh, I'm not very good at math," because when they sit down to do math, it actually feels hard, like they don't have the energy for it. That's because the neural pathway is very, very thin. It has a lot of resistance in it, like a filament in a bulb. But if you have a big cable, stuff passes through it really easy. So when you hear people say, "Yeah, I like to think about that," that means they have a big neural pathway. So the sensation of building up a neural pathway is the sensation of being easier to think. It's so cool. It's cool stuff.
I love that. And you're really talking this part about flow, right? Like finding flow. So it just in that same way that, I didn't dance for years, right? However many decades it was. I don't know. Not very many because I'm so young. Um, so you don't do it, and then you go back to something. And what's interesting about my experience in it, it's so such a good example of what you're describing, because I did do it to a point where I really knew how to do it. I was very good at it when I was young, and then I didn't do it, and I forgot everything. And as I went back into this, I was terrible at it the first lesson, but I was unreasonably better at it the 10th lesson, right? Where people were like, we don't understand. Did you have classes somewhere else? Are you taking more classes than you're telling us about? Right? Because that pathway can be reactivated in that way, that once you build it, it's not gone. It's not gone. It's shriveled up. You can't use it. And that feeling of ease that you talked about, that's flow, right? That's flow state. And to be able to access that in any form, I think, you know, meditation is a great form for that, but there are so many forms that people can find their way, right? Yeah, 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 and it changes everything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in Taoism, there's a concept called Wu Wei, which literally translated means doing, not doing. And the way it's described in the Tao Te Ching is say, the master does nothing, and yet nothing remains undone. And this is the sensation of muscle memory. You know, when you might get a basketball player who has an extraordinary night, you did so good out there, and he goes, you know, it didn't even feel like it was me out there. It was all like on auto drive because he had practiced so much that the neural pathways were so well ingrained and so well greased that there didn't require any doing. It just happened. And one of the times we were talking to Master Nee, who was just amazing. Um, and we wondered, you know, what is it like for you to be Master Nee? I mean, he was truly a master. And I said, what is it like for you to be Master Nee? And he looked at us and smiled. And this is what he said right away, without even thinking. He said, no rehearsing thoughts. In other words, he lives his whole life in muscle memory. He never thinks about what he's going to say, never thinks about what he did. He's just there in the moment, and things happen and words come out of his mouth and actions occur. But it's like he does none of it. It just all happens, and it's all beautiful and it's all perfect. And you know, that's mastery.
That's an inspiration for all of us. Well, I feel like we could sit and talk for the next 10 days, and but the podcast is a half hour. So you know, let us know, how can everybody get in touch with you and stay in your wisdom?
Uh-huh. Well, my new book is called I Am the Way: Finding the Truth and the Life Through a Biblical Reimagining of the Tao. So you can just search for I Am the Way book, and you ought to find it. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble and the like. And there's a contact point in my website, which is iamthewaybook.com. Iamthewaybook.com. And that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. And for meditation, I have another website, but you'll publish that link.
Yes, I will. Definitely. Definitely. Thank you so much. And I will say the book is quite beautiful and well worth a read, even if you're not a Christian. So I know that it's in the description of it, it talks a lot about Christianity, and not being a Christian, I might have passed by it, but well worth it. So go out and pick it up right now.
Well, it's especially for people that had some background in Christianity but left it for the perhaps because of the exclusivity and the dogma. Okay, this is just the teachings without any exclusivity, without any dogma, without any of that organized religion stuff.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I want to encourage all of you to also go to donnalynn.blog and pick up the free resources there. There are so many of them that I will not enumerate them here, but I will say it's growing all the time, and you will find resources to help you with every emotion that you go through and to help you to find that inner joy.